hardest things that guitarists have when they're trying to learn to play lead is to switch from thinking key-centric soloing to chord tone-centric soloing. And I think, at least for me, when I first started learning scales, I was just so excited that I could play over a progression with notes that actually work.
And there was much rejoicing.
And so I found myself in sort of that cycle that I think a lot of guitarists who are pursuing lead, especially improv lead, find themselves in, and that's just sort of noodling around the scale rather than following the chord tones. And beyond hearing about following chord tones, you always hear about how you're supposed to have this intentional sort of phrasing, right? You're supposed to speak in sentences, whatever the hell that means. And so I have a couple exercises that I'm gonna go over today that are both gonna help you with rhythm and phrasing in your lead playing and in your improv, and how to follow those actual chord tones. So here's what you need to know to get something out of this video. You need to know the minor pentatonic shape. Okay, we're gonna be using that, but actually we're gonna change the way we think about it, and we're gonna think of it in terms of major today. And you need to know the basics of counting, okay? So if you can play in 4 time, then you're good to go. One of the easiest habits that you can get yourself into right now to start making your playing, both your rhythm and your lead, much, much more intentional sounding, is to start thinking in 4s. Now, I know all of you are gonna come out of the woodworks and say, well, what about 3/4 time? What about 5/4 time? What about 7/4 time? Yeah, those exist, they're not in 4, and they're their own beasts. But 90% of Western music is in 4/4 time. So if you really get yourself into the habit of counting in 4s, that's gonna put you in a good position to play the vast majority of music that the vast majority of you are trying to play. Now, when I say think in 4, I'm both talking about beats in a measure and in measures together. So we're thinking in terms of 4, that's the space within a single measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, so that would be one measure. But I also like to think in groups of 4 measures. To make each phrase, we're gonna think, just in terms of this lesson, we're gonna think of each phrase being contained in a measure. Sometimes they're gonna span in between the measures, but essentially one phrase per measure. But we're also gonna think about 4 adjacent measures as one sort of musical idea, one sort of sentence that contains a little bit of movement within that longer stretch. Now, I know a lot of this probably sounds very restrictive to some of you, especially those of you who like to campaign against music theory and all of its cousins. It is a little bit restrictive. And as a writing teacher, I understand the feeling here, because when I'm teaching writing structure, when I'm teaching you that your thesis belongs at the very end of your intro paragraph, when I'm teaching you that there should be balance between the length of your body paragraphs, I make it very, very clear to my students, just as I'm gonna make it clear to you right now, that this is the starting point. This is how you understand to walk before you can sort of shed these restrictions and start running. So to do this, we're gonna just set a 1-chord vamp. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did for the beginning of this video. That was just a single D chord vamp. Now, I mentioned that you need to know the minor pentatonic, and then we're actually going to turn that into major. So for D, we're going to be working with the B minor pentatonic, which is also the D major pentatonic. Okay, so that's here at your 7th fret. Now, when you're thinking in terms of minor, your roots are going to be here at the 7th on the top and the bottom, and at the 9th on the D string. In major, our root is going to move. Our root is here at the 10th fret on the E string, here at the 7th fret on the G string, and then back to the 10th fret on the high E string. Now, the reason your D major pentatonic is the same thing as your B minor pentatonic is because they're relative majors and minors. Okay, now I'm not going to go into the full description of this, but in order to determine this, if you only know your minor pentatonic and you want to learn how to use that with major, use the circle of fifths. You can see for every single one of these chords, the major chords on top, the minor beneath it is going to be the relative minor. Okay, so that means when you have C, A minor is the relative of C. They contain all of the exact same notes. E minor and G, B minor and D, so on and so forth. You can also, if you've started getting into the caged system, you can think of this space as the A shape from the caged, right? So you have this bar chord here. So if you play this bar chord at 5, you can see these 3 strings here on B, G, and D all line up with that A shape moved up here. This is a D. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tackle this in phases. The first phase, we're only gonna think about the 1, the root note here, and think about accenting that 1 in every single phrase or in every single measure. For the first time around, we're just gonna accent it just only playing that root, just the root on the 1 to really sink into that. After that, we're gonna accent the 1, but I'm gonna play just some other almost random pentatonic stuff around the 1, just to give sort of the spackle. I like to think of it as the studs holding up the structure and the spackle sort of filling in the gaps. So when we hit these chord tones, we're laying the foundation for our structure. When we're playing the pentatonic, our other licks are with this and that around it, that's just all the spackle to fill in the gaps. So we're gonna set this looper on a 1-chord vamp on a D chord here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now I know that's 2 measures, but it loops, so we're still thinking in terms of 4. Okay, so for the first time, we're gonna call this phase 1A. I'm just gonna play the root note on the 1. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, and 4, 2. Now I'm gonna add some spackle. Second measure. Now we see, I wasn't necessarily on that phase 1B, I wasn't necessarily hitting the root note on the 1 every time, but I was hitting it as the accent note of that measure. Now phase 2, we're gonna talk about this in phase 2A and phase 2B as well. Now we're gonna start adding in the other chord tones. So again, this is a lesson all on its own, but your chord tones are your 1, 3, 5 intervals. Now in the case of this major pentatonic scale shape, we already know where our 1 is, right there. Our 3 that we're gonna think about is right here, and our 5 is up here. Now you have other octaves of all of those chord tones in this shape, but we're gonna keep it simple and only think about those 3 locations here. So 1, 3, 5. Now for this first phase, I'm gonna turn the looper back on. We're gonna do the same thing as we did in phase 1. We're just gonna hit only the root note right on the 1 of the measure, just to make sure that we've locked these in. 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. Okay, and I'll go back to the 3 here. Okay, and back to the 1. See if you can mix it up. Let's try to go to the 5. Back to the 1. Let's go to the 3. But you want to be able to call these out. Be able to access, know exactly where your 1, 3, and 5 are of that. Once you've got that down, and this might take you a couple days to really internalize this, but once you've got that down, then we're gonna do the same thing that we did in that first phase, and we're gonna start adding a little bit of spackle in between the studs here. 1. Now what you can do to start challenging yourself a little bit more, and we'll call this the boss fight of this. This is, you can take this so much deeper, but in terms of chord tones, this is lesson 1, and this is your final challenge here. So what I want you to do is you're gonna be targeting the 1 on the first measure, the 3 on the second measure, the 5 on the third measure, back to the 1 on the fourth measure. Then we're just gonna keep moving up. So the next, the 5th measure, the next set of measures, you're gonna start on the 3. Then the 5, then the 1, then back to the 3. Then on the third set, this would be your 9th measure, you're gonna be at the 5, 3, 1, 3, okay? So since there's only 3 notes but 4 measures, this is gonna continuously make us have to shift where those notes are appearing. All right, so let's give that a go, see how it works. 1, 2, ready, and 1. Start on the 3. Now let's start on the 5. To the 1. 3. So where you're eventually going to go from this is being able to switch between chords. So that was just one single, really I like to think of that as a triad that we were working with. I'm thinking about this triad shape more than I'm thinking about this full pentatonic shape around it. But really that's just one shape that we're working around. There are several, countless shapes all around that will cover all of your different chords, right? Right here we're playing a D. If I move this right here, we're playing a C, and we have a 1, 3, 5 in C. Up here, 1, 3, 5 in G. Or 1, 3, 5 in G, 1, 3, 5 in D. So what you want to be able to do is know where these chord tones are in all of these different shapes, and then be able to switch between them. But it really helps. I think too many people try to learn too many shapes all at once. Just really master one shape at a time. But this is a super simple, straightforward way to get you sounding intentional and to get you following those chord tones. I hope this was helpful for you, and I really view every person's musical journey as a sacred thing. So I'm truly honored to have been invited into yours, and I hope that you invite me back in the future. If not, thanks for hanging out today, and keep this thing in your hands.